Alright, what you're looking at here is a 1993 Evinrude 40 horsepower. What I need to do here is remove the lower unit, change the water pump, and then while it's apart, I'm going to go ahead and change out the gear lube inside the unit here. Okay, engine is tilted all the way up, so let's do the propeller first. Stupid pin. Now the 5/8 bolt right here. And the 3/8 tilt pin. Now with the lower cover off, this is incredibly easy. With it on, you can still get to it, it's just a little harder. So that's what the pin looks like, a little shoulder bolt, so you don't want to lose it. And now the 9/16 bolts on each side. It's 2 on each side, in case you're curious. Now I saved that one for last because from this angle it's easier for me to get to it. I get the lower unit, and you don't want it to drop and hit you. So you always just leave one. See, the lower unit is already falling. You can see it kind of dropping for every turn. So you gotta be prepared to catch it. Now it is. Alright, aside from the water pump kit, I'm going to need a few different things. Needle bearing assembly grease, moly lube, gasket sealing compound, and gasket sealant M, aka 3M847, and then just some dish soap. Usually I would use Dawn here, but I don't know where the bottle is. Danny's probably been using it as it's the best soap imaginable, but we'll roll with this Ajax or whatever it is. Alright, here's our water pump. As it is black and not the tan beige color, I think this thing has been changed at one point in time, probably pretty recently, although I don't know yet. I haven't opened it up. So, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with this water pump. A lot of people that saw my pontoon boat video saw this engine running and that water pump pumping very little water. I don't think it's a water pump. I'll dive into that later, but I think the water pump's fine. However, as the engine is of unknown quality to me, we're going to change it anyway. It's just kind of a preventative maintenance thing. So let's get these 4 bolts off the water pump. Let's get the housing off. So there's the impeller key. Water pump. And not much to it, really. So vanes, they're kind of bent, so it's probably a few years old. We did have some cracking there, but it's still pliable enough. So water pump is probably working, but it probably did need to be changed. It's probably time. Let's get this plate off. And this gasket. Alright, I got some 150 sandpaper. So I'm going to clean up the mating surface of the water pump here. Now to make sure our screws go in and out okay, I'm going to run a 1/4 tap using one of my tap sockets to clean out the threads of the screw holes. The die or tap needs to be cleaned and re-oiled every pass. So keep that in mind. Alright, within our kit we need to grab our new gasket and our bottom plate, which we then install down and over our drive shaft. With any luck you get it right orientation the first time. Now most of the time you're going to find this kit with this cup already installed. There's a little notch, those line up, kind of lock together, and that is how inner cup goes. Now for the outside, we have these two weird sealing thingies. Flat one goes on the top that way, and this guy sits in like so. But you don't just throw them on there. That's where your gasket sealant M comes in handy. You need to put some into this groove. I'm probably putting too much, but alright, that'll seal that on. Now this guy, same thing. Put some sealer in there. This notch, I've seen it both forward and backwards. I really don't think it makes a big difference. But we'll go ahead and throw that notch forward. Turn it a couple of times. Now, you are supposed to apply gasket sealant M to the impeller housing plate area of the drive shaft, or of the housing. Yeah, that's not that clear what they mean. So what I'm going to do is just put the stuff all over this gasket, both sides, and then call it a day. Now this stuff is gross, so you might not want to use your hands here. It's very stringy. It's weird. Alright, now if that doesn't seal it, nothing will. It also dries very fast, so keep that in mind. Now you got a few seconds here. Alright, that is done. Now I'm sure those are set up quite well by now. So now we need to install this little bottom special shape O-ring thing. Looks like right out there. We'll lay it in perfectly. So we're going to run some more M here into this little groove. Now inside of our little bag here, we'll find the 4 screws and this little impeller key. We're also going to need, going from here, our impeller and our impeller O-ring. Why these still have O-rings is beyond me, but they do. Now what you're supposed to do is install the impeller into the water pump and then slide the water pump housing, impeller and all, onto the drive shaft. But good luck doing that, especially considering you need to line this O-ring and this key at the same time. It's just a nightmare. Good luck. So what I'm going to do is slide our O-ring down. So our O-ring, which is for the base of the impeller, we're going to need some of this needle bearing assembly grease. Now if you don't have any of this or plan on using it elsewhere, I'm going to find something else so you don't have to spend the cost of the needle bearing grease, but it works. So the drive shaft will always spin clockwise. You want the leading edge, as they call it, of this impeller key, so the little sharp point, to face clockwise or with the rotation of the drive shaft, which is right about there. Now the assembly grease is basically the sticky grease that will hold it, so I'm sure normal everyday grease would do the same job. So we do slide the impeller housing down to match that keyway, and hoping it engages. May have to hold it, re-look a couple of times. Now there should be no way to move this impeller on that drive shaft. And we're good. Now comes in our Dawn/Ajax. This will kind of make a slippery way for the drive impeller to go in, not drive shaft. So I'm going to use a drive shaft socket. This is OMC 334995. This will go at the top of the drive shaft so I can spin it easy as I go. Now there are sockets you can buy that claim to fit a spline shaft, generic everyday sockets. I'm telling you right now, they're not going to work. Usually it's a 13 spline or 14 spline socket, and you need like a 16 on this. If you want to do it this way, buy the right socket. If not, you can turn the housing by hand, but it's easy with the socket. All right, I'm going to slide the housing over the drive shaft and down, lining it ish where it needs to go. Now the goal here is to not take out the weird shaped O-ring on the base of the impeller. So what I'm going to do is kind of help the splines go in, and I knocked off this. Well, it's on there, but the O-ring isn't. That's a problem. The bearing cup staying behind it isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that's going to work. So the only concern with doing it that way is the little tabs on the impeller cup aren't going to align, but it looks like they did just fine. So I don't think we're going to have any issues. Obviously if it doesn't pump water, I'm going to readdress this. But for the most part, looks like that's going to work. I'm going to tighten that down now, and we'll move on. Okay, each screw should be coated in this gasket sealing compound. That kind of prevents acts as an anti-seize. Make sure the screws don't lock themselves in. You just tighten these screws down to the recommended torque. And I alternated the screws too to make sure it gets kind of go down evenly. Think of tightening it like you would a car rim. And check for smooth operation. Now, new water pump is going to be kind of on the tight side, but just give it a rotate, make sure it doesn't like grind or bind or anything weird. This feels fine. And in comes our moly lube. This is an anti-seize kind of stuff that prevents the drive shaft from getting seized into the crankshaft. So you want to put it on the splines. Make sure you don't get any on the top because there's not much clearance into the crankshaft. And if you get any on the top, the grease may affect that, and you may have kind of problems. So just the splines, not the top. Now see this rubber grommet right here? Not necessarily a problem, but we got to take it off. That grommet goes right here. Sometimes it'll stay put, sometimes it'll come off. Just keep an eye out for it if it does, and then just reinstall it. And before install, I want to drain the fluid and put new in. So the top screw is what's called the vent screw. You want to remove that first. If you remove the bottom screw, the drain screw, and there's any pressure built up in there, you're getting a face full of oil. I know this from experience. So once that's out, then you can get the bottom drain screw out, which is a little bit bigger in these ones. Most engines are going to, well, a lot of older engines, you're going to find two drain plugs, look like that, same size both top and bottom. On these 40s, 48s, 50s, you're going to find a little one and a big one and a little one. So we'll let that drain. See it coming out right here. So let it drain, pump in new stuff. So if you look at our screw, you'll notice no seal washer thing. So that means it's still stuck in the gear case. So we got to get that out of there. And you should replace them, little seal, every time you remove it. So I have his gear case lube and a little gear case pump. Screw it into the bottom here. And you pump away until the oil comes out of the top hole. Alright, fluid's coming out the top hole, which means we're full. Now we put in our screw on the top. Then we got to quickly get out the pump. So what I'm going to do is quickly unscrew the pump and then put in our drain screw. Now I'm going to clean all the attaching hardware up with that wire wheel on my grinder here. Now I'm going to coat all the threads in the gasket sealing compound, and then I'm going to leave them, close to my bench here so they're ready to go in. Now we can reinstall our lower. Now, as it goes in, since we rotated the drive shaft, the splines into the crankshaft aren't going to line. So what you're going to want to do is, as you push it in, rotate the flywheel up here with your other hand, and kind of give it some force and ease it in. The other thing you got to do at the same time is make sure your shift rod is going to lie with your shift rod pin down here. So, a lot going on. Alright, let's get this lower back installed. Shift rod through the lower grommet. Shaft in the hole. Push it up. Now what you want to do is make sure the shift rod pin is going to line into its little slot. If it doesn't, you're going to be mad at yourself. Rotate the flywheel a little bit. And lower slid in. Now we got to make sure that our shift rod is in there too. And it's kind of hard to tell, but it's in there. So I'm going to put probably the bigger bolt in first into the back. So that's kind of what we're left with. A little bit of force, mates right up, and then we just got to start putting the screws back into it. Now we just go around and tighten down all the screws. Now the only thing left to do is install the trim pin. Excuse me, the shift pin. Well, I'm about ready to install the lower cover here, and I remembered something. What about that hose? What were you going to show us about that? Well, when the pontoon boat video first came out, a lot of comments said, hey, you need a new water pump. You got lucky you didn't overheat that motor. You need a water pump. And I agree. I do need a water pump because I didn't know how old it was. However, I did trust it because this engine is pretty good and ran before. You can also just put your hand on the cylinder head and see if it's getting too hot. It's a pretty good indication of its cooling ability. Now, I knew that the prior owner installed a water pressure gauge. When I noticed that, I also noticed our indicator hose here had a fitting and a clamp onto it. I'm thinking what happened is he put a T here and tried to tap into his gauge via this hose, which granted has some pressure, just not very much. This little barb that he put in there is where a restriction came from, made it look like it wasn't really pumping any water. So if you have a new water pump, or think you got a new water pump, and you're not seeing any water over the indicator hole or hose, you might want to check for restrictions. There's a very good chance you have one. Now this looks like a piece of rubber hose inside of a piece of rubber hose they clamped on. I'm sure this restriction is a lot worse than it looks like on my camera, at least when it's clamped. So it's probably where our problem came from. But I don't need this rigged up hose, so I'm going to replace it. And this situation comes down over here, which, well, the lower mounts are off. It's a good time to change it. Now, if you do wind up changing this hose, you got to be careful because these fittings can break easily. Out with our old and in with our new. Well, motor's all back together. So that is it for now. This thing is about ready to go onto the pontoon boat again. So if you got any questions, shoot them below. Otherwise, see you next time.